Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I'm your host, Tommy Maloney. Thanks for coming by today. This is a interesting episode here. We're going to the way back machine, my good friend Sherman, and December 8th, 2017, our guest was Bruce Gammill. And Bruce is as closest to a wine sommelier you can get to. We're not just going to be talking wine on this episode, even though that's a little bit of the focus. What we're also going to talk about is Bruce's family. And Bruce is also a blended family, and he talks about that. But I wanted to share this episode with you again because we're getting close to the day that we celebrate love and the heart, and even though it's not really a holiday, but I'm just amazed that this episode is from 2017. We've been doing this podcast for a long time, and are you as surprised as I am that I'm not a billionaire after this? Anyway, I need a favor. I'm going to ask for an ask, and that ask is, please head over. I'll put a link in the show notes to go over to the YouTube channel. I've been putting out a little bit more videos, not just of me, but our dog Otis. Otis has been really popular on YouTube, but I also have stuff out there. So please head over to YouTube and subscribe. Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, or Stitcher, subscribe, or just go to the website, blendingfamily.com, and you click on the subscribe button there. Whew. Not really much to report. Just excited to share this episode with you. So let's just get into it. Let's do it. I don't want to bore you. I want you to learn something about wine. I want you to learn something about blended families. And I just want you to enjoy the rest of your day. And as Terry Crews would say, your success is my success.
Welcome to Blending the Family, the podcast. Topics can range from dads hitting rock bottom, daughters watching their parents divorce, or even what is a good wine for couples to have while talking about finances. Here's your host, whose favorite wine is red and free, Tommy Maloney.
Oh, no, that was your opportunity to go cheap.
Okay. Here's your host, whose favorite wine is red and free. Cheap. Tommy Maloney.
Welcome to another edition of Blending the Family, the podcast. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. On this episode, Bruce Gammill is on the show live in person in the home studio, and we're talking wine. No, not but more of a glug. Anyway, Bruce is as closest to a wine sommelier as I can get a hold of, if that makes sense. But anyway, not only does Bruce talk to us, you and I, about wine, but we also talk about his experience in the world of blending the family. Something I also want to mention, we do talk a lot about wine, and I hope this doesn't distract you, but he has so much knowledge, and I wanted him on this episode or on this podcast because if you are going out for a first date, or if you're going out and somebody's cooking for you and they say, hey, go grab the wine, Bruce gives you some great tips of what type of wine to get, red or white. I'm a red guy. I prefer red, but that's just me. And if you want to send me red wine, I prefer a Cab or a Merlot or a Pinot. That's it. Those three. Anyway, we talk about wine. We talk about blended families. We talk about some of the wineries to go to if you hit wine country. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this wine episode. I am super pumped. I'm super excited. And Bruce brought over a great bottle of wine that we got to enjoy. And I'm done enjoying it, unfortunately, because my glass is empty. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Have a great one and enjoy this episode of Wine.
It was a great year. It's nice wine.
So a little bit of the backstory for our listeners is that if you've been listening to this podcast, you always hear what it's a good wine to talk about finances, and that's one of the things that Ann and I will be doing probably tomorrow night, talk about our finances. And a friend of mine, his idea was, if you're going to talk about finances, bust open, and he knew that both Ann and I drink wine. He'd say, get a bottle of wine and hash it out. So I wanted you here, Bruce, for several reasons, because number one, you have such a vast knowledge of wine, and every time you've suggested something, spot on. I mean, every time.
That's the satisfying part of working at that store.
Yeah.
Because it's just, every new person is problem solving. Mm-hmm. And it's just fun to do.
My new favorite, other than one we're drinking right now, is the Smoking Loon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a great wine. But one of the things I wanted, and we had talked about this maybe months ago, 2 months ago, when we had coffee, is in the world of divorce, when you get back in that dating scene, and for example, when Ann and I went on our first official date, we went to a steakhouse here in town, and she said, pick the wine. And I almost, had a heart attack right then and there. And I also...
So she was testing you right from the start.
Well, the funny thing is, Bruce, is that we went to a steak place. I ordered chicken.
So you were testing her right from the start.
I guess. So when couples go on dates for the first time, what should they, whoever's ordering the wine, so to speak, what should they be looking for? Is it the brand? Is it... what's a safe bet? To somewhat try and be educated, in that mere split second of time when somebody says, well, you order the wine. Oh, dear God.
Interesting question. There's a couple of ways to work, depending on the restaurant. I mean, if you're spending some money and they have a sommelier, mm-hmm. you could throw it all off on that guy or gal. Mm-hmm. And I think what they would probably do is come back to you. It's kind of what I ask people when they come to the store. They say, I need a bottle of wine. And I always ask, is this for food or are you just going to drink it on your own? So obviously in a restaurant, you're going to have food with it. And then you ask, do you drink much wine? Do you know the difference between sweet or dry? Mm-hmm. Most people don't. It's a matter of semantics as much as anything. And then do you prefer red or white? If you're not getting any help, the wine which is probably a good hedge is Pinot Noir.
Okay.
Red wine, lightest of the reds. It's sort of the entry-level red. It is dry, which means there's no residual sugar in it. It's not a sweet wine. It's going to be a 12, 13... hopefully not 14%, but 12, 13% alcohol. But as Pinot Noir, it's going to be light on tannin. Now, this Cabernet we're drinking had a lot of tannin in it, which is why it has stayed this way. Tannin's the natural preservative that leaches out of the skins and pulp and keeps a wine intact, like this. Pinot Noir doesn't have a lot of tannin. So for the consumer, it won't have that heavy sense in your mouth that some people call dry. It's not. It's the sense of like a dry kitten's tongue.
Oh, okay.
It's when your tongue's, that's dryness. But no, that's tannin. And again, the other thing that Pinot Noir doesn't have a lot of is acid. All wines have acid. That's the sensation you get around the perimeter of your tongue when you put a wine in your mouth and it feels hot and makes you want to drool. Mm-hmm. There are 3 principal acids in wine, citric acid and 2 others that I can never remember. And Pinot Noir is light on tannin, light on acid. So it's red wine with training wheels. And what's nice is they say pair it with the white meats. So pork, turkey. The other safe bet is salmon. But Pinot can hold its own against a piece of beef, and it's not offensive with a piece of chicken or a light piece of fish. So I think the scapegoat is Pinot Noir.
That's good to know now. Where were you when I got married? But
it looks like you did okay.
I did okay.
Yeah,
I did okay. For the listeners, I'm sorry you're not drinking with us. Or maybe you are. I don't know.
We need a steak with this, though.
Yeah.
This is hunko beef.
Yes. And I've gotten better. I started eating steak every once in a while.
You just took a sip. Do you feel in your mouth?
Yeah, take another sip now.
Yeah, you probably should. Like you can sort of smack your tongue a little bit.
Yeah.
It's going to sort of your mouth.
A little bit.
That's tannin.
Yeah.
That's the remains of the tannin. That's why I say I bet this guy's good for another 10 years at least. And the color hasn't fallen out. It's not. It hasn't turned brickish. It's still nice dark red.
Has legs. You've said, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not a fan of the whole legs theory.
Well, you go into the Oxford Wine Encyclopedia, and for about 4 pages in mouse print on each side of the page, they go into explanation of legs and all the significance, and in the end, they come to a simple conclusion. That's cool. All legs is a visual measure of the viscosity of the wine. Doesn't tell you a whole lot. The other part that's more interesting is this little ring that you see that's clear liquid between the top of the wine and the side of the glass, and that's alcohol. It's called the meniscus. It's alcohol separating from the wine and following the different surface tension of the glass and climbing up the side of the glass. And the higher that goes, they tell you, it's, again, visual. Just gives you a sense of how much alcohol is in the wine. Also gives you a sense of the quality and cleanliness of the glass. This is a nice glass. And so it's creeping up the side here. And again, it's just the clear ring at the top of the wine sitting in the glass. And again, a very fine wine and a very fine glass. That little ring can go up 1/8 inch. And if you look at it very carefully, it's you can see the colors of the spectrum swirling in it. It's kind of the same sensation as if you watch a drop of gasoline in a puddle in a gas station.
Yeah.
And it's very pretty stuff. Again, it means nothing, but it's just kind of what's going on in here. Again, the meniscus.
Yeah. So, what else can you help the listeners as far as first dates, wine, or even if they're not at a restaurant, going to, their local liquor store. Are there any particular brands that they could pick out or should pick out? Because I know we've had these discussions of a couple of the wines I like, and you're like, no. And then 2 seconds later, you're turning around, handing me a bottle of wine. I'm like, all right, whatever you say, Bruce, because I know you're right. But what kind of wines can, especially again going on, maybe he's cooking for her, she's cooking for him, and she says, or he says, all right, I'll go pick out the wine, or you go pick out the wine.
Well, and that's kind of the same situation as the restaurant. And thinking about that, I think really the best approach is to turn around and ask her, what is your preference?
Okay.
Heaven knows my wife's always turned things back around on me. What do you want to do on Saturday? And then they say, you pick. And then once I pick, they'd change their mind, tell me what we're going to do.
Right.
So I think it's the same thing. Put them on the spot. Find out what their preference is, red or white, sweet or dry. Gives you a source of conversation. The next step is, do you have a sense of what you might be eating? And so if she says, gee, I'd love to have the roast beef, a little cue would come in your mind, well, red with meat, white with fish, right?
Right.
It's it's a real vague generalization, but the idea is you always want to pair the wine with the food. You don't want the wine to overpower the food or the food to overpower the wine. So if you had a steak and a light white wine like Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Grigio, you did just as well ordering a glass of water,
Right.
Because you'll never taste the wine. The opposite is true if you ordered a piece of trout and a great big, dark, heavy Cabernet, you'll be eating chalk. So you might want to play it that way. Match the color against the food. And the compromise ultimately is going to work out to be Pinot Noir. I mean, if you have no clue, it'll be Pinot Noir.
Well, it's funny because I remember Ann and I stopped by, and I think we were just making one of those frozen lasagnas. And that's what your recommendation was a Pinot Noir versus a Cab or a Merlot because the heaviness. And that really resonated with me because I really never thought. I mean, I understood, if I'm having meat, the law says I have to have red wine. But it doesn't tell you the type of red wine to have with. And that was one of the biggest, again, things that stuck in my head going, oh, that makes sense. If I'm having a heavy meal, I don't want my wine to be heavy as well because it's just going to make me bloated.
Well, think about it. A piece of beef full of fat, pungent, smoky, may have mushrooms on top and onions and all that
stuff.
Stop
the
that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need a wine with plenty of acid in it, and a good quality Cabernet or Merlot or Syrah will have acid in it. I mean, it's, again, naturally occurring. It'll have plenty of tannin in it, all of which will combat all those flavors inherent to the beef. Conversely, say you have a piece of white fish, fairly delicate white fish. Sauvignon Blanc is a good match. There are really two styles of Sauvignon Blanc. One that's very popular around here is the New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs. It's a product of very good marketing from the folks from New Zealand. Then they're the ones that are typical in California, which are more of a French Bordeaux style. The New Zealand ones, or in general, Sauvignon Blanc is, now think about this, with white fish, lemon, lemongrass, melon, citrus.
Right.
You're going to squeeze a piece of lime on your fish? Maybe. You might as well go the rest of the way with the wine. And so that's New Zealand. Very citrusy, very acidic. Nice match. California tends to make its Sauvignon Blanc in what's called a white Bordeaux style. So you take the Sauvignon Blanc grape and then you add another grape to it to take some of the flintiness out of it, some of that edge. And the grape they often add is Semillon. There's several types of Semillon that you can add. And that'll just smooth the heat of the acid out of the wine. And again, called a white Bordeaux. And so in the French style. And so you can play with either. But again, I think the Cab with a piece of whitefish isn't going to work.
Yeah.
But the citrusy wine will.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know, maybe, to compare wine with my own age, I think I've improved my taste, sort of, and that is and it's really funny because Ann and I are now on the total opposite spectrum as far as adult beverages go these days. She is really exploring different craft beers and different whiskeys and things like that, and for me, I love wine, preferably red wine, and the reason I've come to this conclusion is the complexity of making wine.
Yeah.
I mean, craft beer, there really isn't a lot of, in my opinion, art and science to it. But at least with wine, you could have the bottle you brought over tonight. You could have 2 bottles. We can open them both up, and we're going to get different flavors out of them. We're going to get different smells out of them. And that's what I love about wine, because you're dealing with the elements, you're dealing with the weather, you're dealing with the soil, you're dealing with grapes. I mean, there's so much behind it. And that's why, I enjoy speaking to you at the store, because I want to learn more about wine. I want to learn about, all right, what is a good wine to go with X. Educate me right now, if, like, for example, let's say we were having fish tonight, but I don't like white wine. I like red wine. Are we sticking with the Pinot?
Yeah. Pinot Noir, or you've seen our section in the store, the GSMs, where we have the Rhone varietal blends. The Cline Cashmere being the exemplar of the bunch. Cline's Cashmere is what sort of want? Sort of a benchmark of GSMs, at least in this country. Cline Winery goes back to 1984 when Fred and Nancy Cline, who were from farm families, decided to get into farming grapes, and they went out to, I forget what was his family or her family's vineyards in the East Bay of San Francisco, and they found all these vines growing there, and but that gone wild, a lot essentially covered in sand dunes, and they dug them out, and they were the Rhone varietals: Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, Lagrigne, Carignan, Viognier. It goes on and on and on. There's again 17, I think, recognized by the French government as the Rhone varietals, and they dug them out and they built their whole winery operation, which is lovely, on that style. Whereas you think about this is from Beaulieu Vineyard going back to 1901. He was a Frenchman, Georges Latour, the founder, and most wineries in California based themselves on the other French grapes, so Burgundy, that's Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, Loire Valley, Sauvignon Blanc, Bordeaux on the Atlantic coast, it's Cab, Merlot, Cab Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot. All heavy reds except for the Sauvignon Blanc and Chard. But the Rhone varietals runs down the Rhone River Valley, Avignon to Arles to Marseille, and they've been overlooked by everybody. So Cline got involved. Other guys are catching on. There's a cult winemaker, that's the best way to describe him, named Randall Graham, who's sort of a hippy-dippy guy, older than me. Lives in the Santa Cruz Mountains. His winery is Bonnie Doon. And Wine Spectator did a cover article about him a number of years ago and called him the Rhone Ranger, because he was a big advocate of these grapes. And has remained so. And so there are a lot of, in fact, the guys who make these Rhone varietals, these GSMs, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, which is now branded type GSM, they have their own website and trade association. They call themselves the Rhone Rangers.
Wow.
And it's a whole different group of wines. Again, for our purposes, a benchmark being Cline Cashmere, Wild Horse has one, Estancia has one, a whole lot of guys have GSMs. And they're just lighter, easier to drink, comfortable. They're sort of like Pinot Noir. They're universal players, and you could have that with anything. And that would be an alternative. Just get a good GSM.
I'll tell you, I'm going to tell the listeners, anything by Cline, you're going to hit a home run with.
True.
I think the first that you got me hooked on was Cashmere, and then recently was the I can't even do it now. As I hold my nose.
So listeners, what he's doing is taking his left index finger to his left nostril, preparing to pronounce in a very French fashion, Viognier. Viognier.
Oh my gosh! And all those that we tasted were, I mean, just, oh my! I think I went 3 weeks in a row buying at least 2 bottles of one of those Cline wines, because they were just so good. And again, it goes back to why I'm so passionate these days about wine is because I can open up one type of wine and open up a different type and just get different flavors and different smell. I mean,
One of the things I've learned in the last 2 years at this liquor store, being exposed to all these craft beers, which I've always dismissed, because I've been like the average consumer where you drink, Bud Light after a hockey game or stuff that's questionable whether it's even beer. You get into the craft beers, and with a little guidance, you go, oh yeah, I smell the orange peel in there and stuff like that. The difference, though, is often with beers, they're adding extracts to the malted beverage that they made.
Exactly.
With wine, it's really the art of the winemaker combined with the art of the grape grower and even the barrel maker combining to create an overall aura for the grape juice when it's got alcohol in it. And the soil where you grow your grapes makes a difference. In California, the big issue is if you plant your grapes where there used to be eucalyptus trees or still are eucalyptus trees, you're going to produce grapes that produce juice that has a hints of cough syrup. It's eucalyptus. And so you don't want to do that. You go to a place like the Napa Valley, there are 33 microclimates just in the Napa Valley, which isn't a huge stretch of land. And every one of those microclimates produces a different, impact on the grapes. You can grow your grapes on the valley floor. If it's unirrigated, it'll give you a certain degree of intensity. If it's near a river, riparian soil will give you a different degree of intensity of flavor from the fruit. If you grow your grapes on a hillside, it gives you a whole different intensity of flavor from the fruit. And in that case, the vines are forced. There's one winery I can think of right now. The vines have to go down, or the roots have to go down about 50 feet into the ground to get any moisture at all. And the winery is far enough up in the hills. I was up there visiting at one time and driving through their winding driveway through all kinds of toyon and all the wild oak trees that are up there. And I noticed that the deer fence around the vineyard was as high as 15 feet high. And you go, just for the deer? That's crazy. And so when I was in the tasting room talking to the host there, I said, why are your fences so high? And he said, it's not the deer. It's to keep the mountain lions away from the vineyard workers.
Oh, wow.
And you go, ooh, okay. So it gives a whole different sense to everything.
Exactly.
Where beer, you take a truckload of grain and you can do that in your bathtub.
Yeah. That's
I guess you could make a line. Well, wine will ferment. The grapes will ferment on the vine themselves, but they won't give you any wine.
Right. So, in our previous conversations we had, so blending in the family, we talk a lot about divorced couples and families and trying to build a successful family. It's a little bit of your backstory too. Was it twice divorced?
Oh, twice married, and then twice divorced.
There you go.
Yeah, one before the other, and 2 kids by each marriage. 4 best kids on earth. With all respect to everybody else, I have the 4 best kids on earth, and cordial relationships with both ex-wives. And funny. Wine is in a way a unifying thread with the kids. They know how much I've enjoyed being involved with a winery, and my exposure to the winery came right after the divorce from my second wife. And our kids were 3 years old when she packed up. And getting totally engrossed in the winery was a nice diversion. Good way to keep my sanity. And my other two kids, the older two kids, were older by then. They were teens, I guess. So they could have a certain appreciation for wine when we started talking about it. Mm-hmm. And as the little ones grew up, I was balancing their visitation with my time at the winery, back and forth. And obviously, typical proud father, there were times when I'd take the kids over to the tasting room, meet the people I worked with. I was thinking about this earlier. You walk into our tasting room, and there's a great big trestle table that meets you with trays of glasses on it. And there's somebody standing there pouring Sauvignon Blanc, saying, "Welcome to Beaulieu Vineyard. This is our Sauvignon Blanc, light and dry," and all this stuff. And my girls, when they were 3+, could walk under the table. Now they're 24,
right?
Which is kind of neat to think about. This is 20 years since that all started, and the wine's held up, and so have the kids, and so have the relationships, which is nice. And so, it's and the younger ones are twin girls, and they were visiting each other. They live in different cities, and they sent me a note later saying, "Yeah, we went out. It was one of our first times we could drink together, and we ordered Cline Cashmere."
Oh,
and that's because they had winemaker Cline. His daughter was one of their playmates.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so there's a nice tie, and obviously that's all circumstantial, but the effort through the whole thing was always just stay in touch with the kids.
But see, and that's one of the things that I was just so enamored with talking to you when we're having coffee, is that all 4 kids are just like, I mean, literally, I know it's going to sound wacky, but they are literally siblings.
Yes.
There's no half this or...
None.
Or,
0.
Yeah.
And there's actually a 5th kid. My first wife remarried, had a child, and actually got divorced from his father, and that poor kid was sort of overlooked a little bit, and he just got folded into the brood. And when we get together for Christmas, the standard joke is we need an org chart to figure out who's related to who. but it's all one big happy family, and it's a nice one.
But one of the things because when, like, for example, when Ann and I first got married, we would use, and a lot of people always give us that, like, I have a third eye when I would say, "This is my bonus daughter," or Ann would say, "This is my bonus son," and they look at us like, "What does that mean?" And we would say, "Well, we're not a fan of the word step," and now it's just, this is the girls would say, "This is my annoying brother," things like that. They've taken the label out, but you've never used a label at all, which
0.
is just fantastic.
And that may be in part because I have 2 older brothers. I have to figure this out now.
Please don't make me do math right now, Bruce.
No, I'm just trying to figure out who the hell they are. The oldest brother is a half brother, and then the next brother is just my natural brother.
Right.
Well, the oldest brother he's always been my brother.
Yeah.
I don't know the difference. And so when it came to these kids, I figured there's no distinction.
But where did that come from? Because, not to age you, but back, and I'm sure it was,
No, if you go back, so me growing up in the 60s, they were very conscious about step and half and all that stuff.
Right.
And to me, that was always BS. I had no interest in that.
Exactly.
And again, with my 4 kids, I really have no interest in it because they're my 4 kids. I don't care who the mothers are.
Right.
They're my 4 kids.
Right.
And they get full attention from me regardless. The 2 oldest kids, when they were 8 and 5, I think, their mother moved to New York, was there, and I was in California, and then that meant I would see them on vacation.
Right.
And then she moved to England, which meant, now when do I see them? And you make Herculean efforts to stay in touch with your kids if you want to have kids.
Right.
And I was going to say ironically, but not ironically, I was always home to them because Mom was on an odyssey.
Right.
Good woman, squared away. But they knew where home was because it's where they started, and I was still there. And it was kind of the same with the twins. Mom packed up and flailed around a little bit, but I was supposed to have visitation on the weekends. Well, I ended up having the kids basically Wednesday through Sunday, and somehow managing to work at the winery on weekends as well, and a full-time job. And people, kids today, complain about working for a 40-hour week. For the 10 years before I moved here, the first 5 years I worked 7 days a week, except for Christmas and Easter, when then I went crazy not knowing what to do. And then the second 5, it was 6 days a week. And same Christmas and Easter. Geez, now what do I do? It works out. And the kids get it.
Right.
They figure it out. And commit yourself to the kids. And with the second set of kids, it was obviously by a second marriage, which I had every hope would be successful. And when it started falling apart, I told her we'll do anything to keep this thing intact. So we saw a psychologist for 3.5 years, 101 hours, and it just didn't work.
Right.
But you make a full commitment to it, and then when that blows up, my full commitment then was to the kids. There was no interest in running around dating, anything else. I had kids, and I wanted those kids. And so, you live a little bit of the life of a monk, but you find something that keeps you, keeps like the wine. You find an interest that keeps you busy.
Right.
And net is all my kids will be here with me at Christmas.
That is funny because when I first was dating Anne, actually our first date was a 3-hour plus coffee date. And
He must have been pry you off the ceiling after 3 hours of drinking coffee.
yeah, but it was well worth it. But the only thing, I became a broken record with her saying, yeah, I like being alone. I like being a hermit. And she kept in the back of her mind going, well, why would I have a relationship with this guy if... But it goes back to because I was less than a mile away from my son Connor, and I really didn't want anything to interfere because, excuse me, I was dating a woman before Anne, and it just seemed that she had a little bit of a jealousy, and she kind of put a little wedge, or tried to put a wedge, and I'm like, no, I'm not dealing with this. But you're right. I mean, because
I think that's commonplace, all too commonplace.
But I think, in my opinion, I think a lot of men don't have that thinking. They think that after I get divorced, I have to go find my next mate. Not really focusing on themselves, not really focusing on the kids. And, it's great to have a hobby, but like you were saying earlier, it should come down to the kids. It should come down to, if I have time or if I have a moment, how can I make that about the kids?
Well, it sounds trite, but at some point you got to grow up. My first marriage lasted 20 years, my second 10. So I had a full 30 years of marriage. And you go, okay. And we got married, first marriage, 21. So I was 50 when we split up. You go, okay, I get it. I understand what that is all about.
Right.
Kids. I have an obligation to these kids who are half me to make sure they fly right.
Right.
And so you focus on it and get over the other crap. And focus on the kids, focus on your career. And that's probably not an uncommon number, 50, because you find a lot of people got, in my generation at least, and I'm 71, but a lot of people in my generation got married at 21 and 20, just getting out of college, and their marriages blew up at 40. It just happened. You start over again. Okay, you've done it. Now focus on your career, because you got 15 years left before you retire.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And make sure your kids are squared away and not a headache.
Right.
And the rest will follow. Don't worry about it. And like for me, as you know, I was working for the British government while I was doing all this stuff. And so that meant on the phone at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning talking to those people. And by noon, 1 o'clock, I was basically done with them. There was more I could do to support them. But you go, okay, I have the weekend or the afternoon.
Right.
And you could find time to pick up the kids after school. And on the weekends, work in the winery tasting room. And working for the British government was all out of the house, so it was totally solitary. So we really were living like a monk. But on the weekend, working in a tasting room where you get 2,000 to 3,000 people on a Saturday afternoon, I got all the social life I wanted for a week. And somehow people have to figure that out. I have a good friend who's just the other way. He's always looking for another woman to satisfy his ego somehow. It's less than the sexual thing. It's the companionship.
Right.
He can't stand to be alone.
Yeah.
You got to go, come on, get over that.
Well, and that's what I was saying is that a lot of times, you know, and I've had in the past with some of the coaching clients I've had, the men, is that they don't realize that. They don't realize they need to work on themselves before jumping to the next relationship. They need to work on their relationship with their kids before jumping into another relationship, because chances are, if that first marriage didn't last and they jump into another one, it's not going to last.
It's you tend to repeat the mistake, and there are a host of things like, you know, adult children of alcoholics. There's a whole syndrome where you marry someone who fits a pattern that satisfies you. That blows up because the marriage is going to be broken. And then you go out and do it all over again because it's the same pattern. And you repeat the mistake. And you have to learn, no. We've got to be looking for a different formula.
Right.
And like, as I said, in my case, 3.5 years of marriage counseling, I loved it. I mean, I learned a ton about myself. Drove her nuts.
Right.
Or more nuts. I didn't say that.
Not out loud.
No. But it was wonderfully helpful to me, and just gave me a whole lot of peace in how I do things.
Well, it's funny because before we got married, Ann said to me, would you be willing to go marriage counseling before we get married? I said, sure. Because we recognized we didn't want to make the same mistakes. We wanted to have this be it. You know, this marriage is it, period.
Yeah.
And same thing. I discovered a lot about myself too, going, oh, I see why I do that or why I don't do that. I mean, it does help.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. but I ended up feeling that, yeah, I'm right.
Yeah. So, technically, 5 kids.
Yeah, 4. And the other tags along when he's around.
Yeah.
More than welcome.
But very successful.
Yeah, nice bunch.
Yeah. Where does that come from? How did that happen?
To the credit of their mothers. The mothers are both real energetic, real good work ethic. I mean, real good work ethic. And although I'm not a ball of fire, my values have always been there in front of the kids. Like we have one rule. The only thing you can do wrong is not tell the truth. So if you screw up, you screwed up.
Right.
Just don't lie to me about it. And I'm not going to punish you for it. If you lie to me about it, I'll punish you. And never cruelly. As a consequence, the kids are pretty quick to say, okay, I shouldn't do this. And they know. And what I've found satisfying now is with the twins at 24, occasionally you get a call for help. I get the call for help.
Right.
And it's like no questions asked and no issues. It's just okay. It's cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must feel really good when you get, I mean, good or bad. It's just nice to have that phone call that you were
Yeah, I'm the one.
You're the one.
Because they know they can count on you, because you're there, and you have been since day one.
So what's the secret?
And that may be the payback. That may be the payback for the years of being a monk, because you were always there.
Right, okay.
And now they know you're still there. And so, like one of the kids, I was calling the twins, and they live in the Midwest, in 2 different cities. Where are you going to be for Thanksgiving? Hoping they would be here. Mm-hmm. One said, I have to stay here. I haven't got enough vacation time, so I can't leave. I'm too new in the job. The other one said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to Paris.
Oh, wow.
And you go, okay. Where should I go? What should I see? What should I do? And I think I may want to go to London. Where should I go? What should I do? And again, I worked for the French government. I worked for the British government. And so let's start with the emails. Right. And then she said, well, I'm going to focus on Paris. I said, done. Do this, this, this. And it was cool. The kid going back and forth about where to go, what to see. Now, her mother had been to Paris with me once or twice, but it was to me. Mm-hmm. So it was nice. And then I got a postcard. So this was for Thanksgiving. Right. The week after Thanksgiving on Friday, I got a postcard. Bonjour, Papa. And she and the gal that she was visiting, who was a classmate of hers in college, went out to Reims, where there's a cathedral. It's about 80 miles northeast of Paris. Okay. And on Thanksgiving Day, and they make champagne there. We went to Reims to taste champagne on Thanksgiving. We are drinking a lot of champagne, Daddy. Again, it's payback. It works.
So would you say that was the secret? Being the monk?
Oh, well, committing yourself to your kids, no matter how you have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought them into the world, you better stick with them.
Yeah.
Because they are you. And if you can't commit yourself to them, you can't commit yourself to yourself.
Now, if you could sum up, what's the best wine you've ever had?
Oh, man. My natural instinct is to go to one from the winery where I worked, Beaulieu Vineyards, and say it's their George de la Tour Private Reserve Cabernet. A bottle of George costs $145, so you don't drink it every night.
Right.
It's awesome stuff. From time to time, they'll go on a streak and enter it into the London International Wine Competition, where it goes up against 4,000 or 5,000 other Cabernets from around the world.
Wow.
And wins.
Wow.
It's just lovely stuff. Now, this cab that we're drinking is just an ordinary Cabernet. The Napa Valley cab on the shelf now is $31. I think it was $145. What it'd be like.
So what's the difference between a $31 bottle of wine and a $145 wine? Is it just the age?
It's the handmade. It's the difference between a Rolls Royce and a Ford.
Okay.
No, a Lincoln. This is a Lincoln that we're drinking. The world is full of Fords. Uh-huh. But when you get to George, you're getting into Rolls Royce territory. Specific vineyards where the grapes are tended by hand, picked by hand, inspected every day. Picked by hand is key. Most wine that you find in the $10 to $15 range is picked by machine.
Right.
When you run machines through rows of vines, the wheels crush the root system of the vine and screw it up. Take care of them by hand. You have guys out there every day looking at the condition of the grapes. If the leaf canopy over the grapes becomes too heavy, shielding the grapes from the sun, they'll go through and remove the leaves one by one, or leaf strip, where they take a gloved leather hand, grab the stem that the leaves are on, and just whoosh, strip it all off. But you do it on the eastern side, so as the sun comes up, it dries off any moisture from overnight. And then on the western side of the leaf canopy, you'll have shade for the afternoon sun so you don't burn the grapes. You do stuff like that. Again, hand-picked, hand-sorted, first-run juice. So you put all these grapes, tons of grapes, into a hopper that basically crushes the grapes. The juice that comes out the first time, the easy juice, is called free-run juice. That's all you ever use, is free-run juice. Now, you could squeeze this stuff 3 or 4 times. I mean, when they make grappa, they take... it's like taking your old coffee grounds, putting them in a paper towel, squeezing that, and then fermenting whatever, or distilling whatever that is. So you use free-run juice, and then it's just, you have one winemaker who's responsible for it. You put it into French oak barrels, American oak barrels. You specify the degree that the oak barrels were burned on the inside, which gives them the charcoal, which is called the toast. When you charcoal the inside of the barrel, of an oak barrel, where the pores are, sugars weep out, and those sugars interact with the wine and give the wine flavors of creamy, buttery, toasty, vanilla butterscotch. And you determine in advance, okay, given the chemistry of this juice, how much of that stuff do I want out? So you decide, do you want medium toast barrels, light toast, heavy toast barrels? Do you want barrels that were used before, or do you want new barrels? Mm-hmm. What percentage of the wine should go into the barrel? It's an orchestration.
Yeah.
It is an art. And I don't think beer makers go through that.
But with a difference between a very less expensive wine versus a little bit of a higher end, is it also how many barrels are produced? Does that make sense?
It can be. It's a reflection of how the stuff is made.
Yeah.
As you know, in the store, we try and do family wineries or estate-owned, where they grow the grapes and make the wine themselves, mm-hmm. as opposed to big industrial things where, if you look at the barrel production or it'll be case production. Like BV, we did 1.5 million cases a year, and we were considered mid-size. You get in the world of Gallo, there are 200-300 million cases of wine a year. There's no way that can be tended with any sort of care.
So they're putting something in there because there's probably not enough.
It's grape juice.
Yeah.
And grape juice will turn to alcohol, mm-hmm. and then they fiddle with it. A good place to look at our friends at Cline. Look at Cline's website. They are one of the most responsible winemakers out there. Everything's sustainable. They have videos on the site that are really educational. They talk about the woolly weeders. In the spring, they bring out thousands of sheep and turn them loose in the vineyards to eat the grass and get rid of the grass, any stuff that's there, and just clean up the vineyards. And then there's a second occasion when they bring them out, and then in the fall they bring them out again after they've picked all the grapes and cut the vines themselves back, and they're just trash on the ground. And the woolly weeders come out and chew them up and clean them up. But it's all as natural as you can be, rather than running trucks through there.
Right.
And the sheep poop in the vineyard rather than fertilizer. And it's a sustainable farming. And when you get serious winemakers, they're the most ecologically conscientious people you'll find. We get a lot of people come in, is this wine organic? Does it have sulfites? And you go, geez, don't give me that.
Yeah.
If you're drinking junk wine, you'll get junk wine.
Yeah.
If you drink quality stuff, the people who make it really care because it's their livelihood. That's the difference.
Man, now I want to go get another bottle of wine.
Yeah, me too. This is good stuff.
This is good stuff. I'm just like I said, Bruce, I love listening to you talk about wine because it's not just the education, but it's there is so much to it.
This is the key that unlocks the door.
Yeah.
A good glass of cab.
Good glass, yes. That's all I got, Bruce. This was just a good time.
My pleasure. Good fun.
Yeah.
And I should say something about sweet wine. Because in this part of the world, people drink sweet wine. There's a place for it. And I'll leave it at that. But they're sweet and dry. Mm-hmm. Well-made sweet wine is okay. Wine snobs tend to turn up their nose at it, but there is a place for it, particularly as dessert wines.
Yeah.
But it's okay. But if it's what you drink all the time, it's kind of like, maybe you should branch out from just drinking, I don't know, Dr. Pepper all the time.
Right. And
try something else.
Real quickly, cork versus screw cap. Any difference?
Cork. Let's go to screw cap. Screw cap is, Australians are huge proponents of screw caps. Screw caps are the best seal. There are wineries in Napa that have screw caps on $120 bottles of wine. But if you're going to put the wine down for any length of time, like this wine, if this had a screw cap on it, it'd be terrible.
Right.
It would have spoiled by now. God knows what would have happened to it. But if you have a nice, high-quality bottle of wine, you want a cork in it, besides just the aesthetic appeal of the pop of the cork, microscopic as there were tiny amounts of oxygen get in there and help change the character of the wine over time. You need that because remember, wine is alive. It's just like cheese. It's alive until you consume it. If you freeze it, you kill it. Same with cheese. If you freeze it, you kill it. So a little bit of air in here, i.e. oxygen, helps the wine oxidize. Think rust. And it breaks down certain properties in here, among them the tannin, which is why this tannin is softer than it was new. It's why when we pour this wine, we swirl it to get air on it, volatilize the esters, free the aromatics, basically, and get oxygen on the wine to soften it up and knock down the tannins even more. So on a quality bottle of wine, you want a cork. If you're going to drink it within the next 3, maybe 5 years, screw cap is absolutely fine. So
I'm going to narrow down everything we've talked about into, here we go. You ready?
Good luck.
Become a monk. Make sure your wine has a cork. And think about your kids.
Well, let's take the become a monk and qualify that a little bit. Working at a winery tasting room where about 3,000 people, 2,000 to 3,000 people can come in on a Saturday afternoon, on a warm, sunny afternoon in the Napa Valley, and it's considered a social event, and the women dress to the nines. You're a rock star.
So you got to be a monk in wine country. How's that?
Yeah, be a monk.
And single.
Yeah, or be a surfing guru or something. But make it work for you. On that note.
Thank you for listening to Blending the Family. The complaint department is now closed for repairs. Try again next time.